What's up, everyone? We've got some Bitcoin news to talk about. According to this article, Bitcoin exchange reserves dropped to a 3-year low, signaling a potential supply shock. We also have North Carolina getting into Bitcoin, working towards a Bitcoin strategic reserve bill. It's the 20th state considering Bitcoin, getting awful close to half of the states considering Bitcoin. Seems like just yesterday we were at like 15, 16 states. A few days before that, like 10 states. This is happening quicker than I expected. Also, Bitcoin miner difficulty hits new highs, signaling miner capitulation and a possible bottom. The last time we saw this was in October 2024. And I wanted to remind you guys that IREN's earnings is coming out tomorrow. Now, I said yesterday that Mara's earnings was coming up. This was actually just a shareholders meeting, I believe, and this was in fact postponed. A lot of people were saying Mara's earnings was this week. This was last week when people were saying this, and I must have gotten a little carried away. As of yet, I don't believe Mara's earnings is officially announced. I did want to remind you guys as well, we'll just touch on this real quick, that PPI and CPI are coming out. PPI is coming out February 13, and CPI is coming out February 12, the day of IREN's earnings as well. And then we'll touch on a few more Bitcoin articles, and we'll also take a look at Solana just killing it in terms of DEX volume. Now let's look at this Bitcoin exchange news. Bitcoin exchange reserves have fallen to their lowest level since 2022, according to this article, hitting a 3-year low of 2.5 million Bitcoin. Now, according to this graph, they appear right. This is near all-time lows. But going over to CoinGlass, you'll see that this was in fact lower, at least according to this. It reached a low of 2.14 million Bitcoin on exchanges, before that being the local bottom, and it kind of spiked here. So perhaps that article might be wrong. Perhaps CoinGlass's data is wrong. Either way, we are near lows. Bitcoin on exchanges is continuing to get depleted. As these spot Bitcoin ETFs, as MicroStrategy keeps loading up, as more and more companies getting into Bitcoin for the first time, continuing to buy Bitcoin, we are going to see this Bitcoin on exchange continue to drop. You might be saying, well, that's 2 million Bitcoin. This is still a lot of Bitcoin. We're still far away from an exchange, a supply shock. And while it may be multiple months away or even not happen this cycle possibly, one thing to think about is how quickly these spot Bitcoin ETFs, how quickly MicroStrategy has been adding. And looking over here at MicroStrategy tracker, MicroStrategy has nearly 500,000 Bitcoin. And looking at the spot Bitcoin ETFs, in only 1 year, basically 1 year of trading, they have over 1 million Bitcoin, 1.2 million Bitcoin nearly. There is a real possibility that we get down to the 100,000s in terms of Bitcoin reserves as these spot ETFs continue to load up on Bitcoin, as MicroStrategy continues to buy Bitcoin, as states possibly start buying Bitcoin, maybe starting in late 2025. It might take longer. The Bitcoin on exchanges is continuing to drop. The institutions, the big boys, are continuing to load up on Bitcoin. Don't let them be the only ones that benefit from price. Now, we do have this news that North Carolina is establishing a state reserve, plans to. And as I said, they become the 20th state in the US to investigate legislation pertaining to Bitcoin reserves. Not all are in agreement. Critics point to Bitcoin's volatility, regulatory uncertainties, dangers associated with linking public funds to digital assets. And while in recent years Bitcoin has experienced a significant increase, it has also experienced significant declines. One day, these people will figure out what the 4-year cycle is. Don't tell them yet. And depending on timelines, there's a big possibility that these states begin loading up in the beginning of the bear market. At some point in the bear market, at some point in 2026. Some might start buying at the peak of 2025. Who knows how long something like this takes? But there will definitely be heavy criticisms if the states start doing this while Bitcoin starts falling down, if Bitcoin enters another crypto winter. There's also the argument that these strategic buying from the ETFs, the states, maybe even other nations, this might keep us elevated, keep us from going to certain lower levels as we get into the bear market. As these companies, entities, states, etc. load up. I do think this upcoming bear market is going to be one of the most tame bear markets we've ever had. History supports this. As we get through cycles, the gains become less and the drops become less. Bitcoin stabilizes over time, becomes more of a stable investment. And this will happen as it is adopted, as it becomes more of a common thing. Now, we also have some Bitcoin difficulty news. Bitcoin difficulty is at an all-time high, signaling miner capitulation. The weaker ones are starting to turn off their machines. The weaker ones are getting more into AI. They're looking for alternative actions because of Bitcoin mining difficulty continuing to rise. And the hash ribbon metric signaled a capitulation in miners, tends to mark local bottoms in price. And they point out to October 2024, the last time this signal occurred, just before Bitcoin surged 50%. We also saw this in early July of 2024. This was post-halving. As difficulty rises, only the most efficient Bitcoin miners will survive. And the weaker ones leaving does benefit the larger ones staying. And despite people's negative sentiment lately, the Bitcoin miners are set to rally. The Bitcoin miners are looking fantastic, starting to see profitable quarters for the first time since the halving, getting back to revenue growth again for the first time since the halving, while many of these Bitcoin miners have much more Bitcoin than they did at the beginning of this cycle. As I said, IREN is reporting earnings. This is going to be tomorrow. It looks like IREN got rejected near its 1350 zone, and it broke under its 1250 zone, likely heading down towards $12 even, back to test the 50 MA before we get into this earnings. What we should see to end this year, to end 2025, is Bitcoin miners posting profitability. Quarter over quarter, consistent profitability, similar to what we saw before the halving cut rewards, when there were some Bitcoin miners that had 2 profitable quarters, and they were rallying, they were near 52-week highs. Before the halving came, cut rewards in half, brought them back to unprofitable. Now, if these Bitcoin miners post profitable quarters and they sell off, what does that tell you? Does that make you bearish on them? Or are you only bearish if they're higher in price? I become bearish when these Bitcoin miners get to crazy prices. The lower they go, the more bullish I am. And while some become bullish when these Bitcoin miners get to new 52-week highs, when these Bitcoin miners are posting bearish divergences, overbought on the daily, on the weekly, etc., that's when a lot of retail likes to get in. You know, you want to buy when things are fearful. You want to buy when no one wants the Bitcoin miners. When something like IREN was $9. Following this ascending channel that IREN has been in since the beginning of this cycle, you want to buy when it's oversold, when it's on the lower level of this line. You want to trim or sell when it's at the top line. Don't be like most retail and buy when it's getting attention. Rather, buy when everyone's fearful. We do have a pretty clear resistance to keep an eye on. It got rejected on it again. If we can post a good earnings from IREN, I do think it's going to break out. Now, I did want to touch on this article real quick. Traders see Bitcoin copying gold, calling for an all-time high in 2 to 3 weeks. Physical gold buying has gone apocalyptic. Gold inventories just surged by 15 million ounces in 2 months. The US has borrowed $838 billion in the last 4 months of fiscal year 2025. Others are optimistic Bitcoin will follow gold's footsteps, a 3-month delay like we typically see. Michael Vandepop says Bitcoin is likely to print new all-time highs. Gold has been printing strong all-time highs. I think we'll see the same for Bitcoin in the coming 2 to 3 weeks. And he also accompanies this with an ideal zone for entries, right around 90K. As long as gold keeps trending, Bitcoin almost always sees a comparable, bigger breakout within 3 to 6 months. Hoping it's on the short end of that horizon this time around, 3 months. That would be wonderful. And Solana is continuing to kill it, just leaving Ethereum in the dust in terms of DEX volume. And Sol's strong performance is visible in the Sol to ETH ratio. The ratio reached around a 0.09 before pulling back to 0.075. And although Ethereum has more money in its system, many traders prefer Solana because Solana is a cheaper alternative to Ethereum. And chart-wise, Solana hit a new 52-week high in late January. I'd say we're following this pretty clear ascending channel, continuing to ride on this support, continuing to find resistance at the top. I would say this would be in a buy zone, buying on the low end of this ascending support. Keep an eye on this descending resistance we've been in since we hit 52-week highs. We're either going to reject here, sell off, hit our lower points here in the 180s, or we're going to break out here and test our 50 MA. We were rejected off it previously before a nice breakout and a reaction before getting back under it. I do think we'll see a good reaction if we can break and hold the 50 MA again. And I do think Solana is on its way for $300 in a short period of time. Bitcoin is continuing to be adopted not just by states, but by publicly traded companies, by nations. Wall Street has embraced Bitcoin. The spot Bitcoin ETFs have broke records, and Bitcoin is not going away. This is going to be an important week in terms of inflation, in terms of hopes for Fed cuts, with CPI and PPI coming out later this week. We of course have IREN reporting tomorrow. That's going to be important for the Bitcoin miners as a whole. And just like CleanSpark saw it, we might see it from IREN, surprise profitability. If the market wants to sell off the Bitcoin miners while they're profitable, so be it. But what do you guys think down below? Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.